Hey folks, welcome back. Chris in Central Pennsylvania. Irony is an interesting thing. It's ironic that South Africa's government, in response to President Trump suspending foreign assistance in February of 2025, their response was, well, we don't need the money for HIV. The U.S. contributes only 17% of our overall HIV funding, neglecting to point out that over the years, the United States has provided the bulk of HIV funding to help South Africans. And if it wasn't for the United States, there wouldn't be any of these strategies, there wouldn't be any of these surveillance programs, there wouldn't be any of these monitoring programs, as well as there'd be no antiretrovirals, which are keeping many people afflicted with HIV alive by keeping the virus dormant in their systems. But of course, South Africans politicians are nothing but ingrates. And so they attacked the United States when we suspended this support last year. Now, here's the irony in all of this. While I was stationed in Botswana 2 decades ago, we reached a peak of $89 million a year in assistance to Botswana through PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Program for AIDS Relief. Now, bear in mind that the title of the program is the Emergency Program for AIDS Relief, not Enduring Program. It's not meant to be into perpetuity. The American taxpayer helping Africans who have created a mess for themselves, and it's our kindness, the generosity of the American taxpayer, that we've given this money to help Africans survive and thrive. So Botswana, which saw a decline from $89 million back down the range around $40-some million per year, didn't cry about this, didn't complain about this. Now, why was Botswana punished? Well, ironically, they're a middle-income country, and they were successful in fighting HIV and reducing prevalence amongst adults age 15 to 49 from 38% to down to about 13% of the population. Their reward was reduced funding from the United States, but that was okay because the government of Botswana took the pandemic seriously and focused on it and increased their funding over time, thereby picking up responsibility for the program themselves. Well done to Botswana. Meanwhile, South Africa has continued to milk the golden calf as we provided so much money over the years, and they've done virtually nothing to wean their dependency from the United States. And then they insulted us, telling us that our funds really didn't have an impact on the program, only for the facts to come out several months later when the monitoring and surveillance programs across South Africa virtually collapsed because there was no one paying the salary of those people who were doing the work because the United States had been paying for it. Now President Trump is saying that going forward, we're phasing out the assistance to South Africa for HIV. And of course, remember, there's a bridge amount for $115 million that was provided through March of 2026. But he's going to phase out PEPFAR for South Africa. Why? Well, the media is saying it's punishment for South Africa's position with Iran, with BRICS, and for its Gaza case, the ICJ, and things like that. No, if anything, it's punishment for South Africa abrogating property rights with expropriation without compensation, which was the proximate cause of President Trump's executive order. But even that is no reason for it. The basis for removing South Africa from the program, quite frankly, is that South Africa is a middle-income country. And if the government weren't stealing so much in the way of resources from taxpayers, they would have the money to do it. For instance, South Africa's government just announced that they're spending $600 million to combat the 30 June domestic terrorism that's going to take place, to attack foreign nationals who are in the country illegally. So if the government came up with 600 million rand to deal with that on short notice, obviously it has the resources to deal with HIV. Now, you might be saying that's a bit of a stretch. It's not a stretch. They do this all the time. They magically come up with resources, either from the World Bank or from somewhere. But the point here is that South Africa is a middle-income country and should not be receiving money for PEPFAR. It is not the president's enduring program for AIDS relief. It's the president's emergency program. Ladies and gentlemen, 23 years later, it's very difficult to argue to anyone that it's necessary to keep PEPFAR funding going. It was an emergency program meant to help countries that didn't have the funding in a crisis. Your crisis is now 2.5 decades old, and American taxpayers are footing the bill for it. Why? We have our own issues here at home. Now, I was a proponent for PEPFAR. I thought it was a wonderful intervention. I also administered multiple PEPFAR programs in Botswana, in Uganda, in Malawi, Niger, Mauritania, all over the continent. And I've seen the positive benefits of the program. But Africans have to take responsibility for Africa. We're always hearing about African solutions for African problems. How about African responsibility for African problems? When do Africans take responsibility for African problems? And if they haven't weaned themselves off in 23 years, it's because we've made it too easy for them to continue to receive the money. We have not done our responsibility in pushing these people off these programs and taking responsibility for themselves. Ethiopia can handle this themselves. Rwanda can handle this themselves. They have the resources. Nigeria. South Africa, Ghana, all governments with resources to handle this. There are some countries that lack the resources that still need our help. But South Africa is not being punished. South Africa shouldn't be in the program, much like they're not eligible for the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, but that's a whole different topic for a different video. Cheers.